Hello everyone, my name is Nicholas, Product Manager here at ShareWeb for the security stack. We have today a special guest, Paul Lupo, Global SC Manager of Cloud and MSP at Bitdefender. So today we're going to do a webinar about how you can effectively protect your customer's endpoint using Bitdefender. And from there, Paul, if you want to go.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicholas. I also have on the line with me one of my security practitioners, Yasser Fuentes. He is on my team. He is an SE for cloud and MSPs globally, and he is incredible wealth of knowledge in the security industry itself, as well as what we do here at Bitdefender. Nicholas, would you like me to move forward with the slides and introduce Bitdefender as a company?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. All right. Bitdefender was founded in 2001, and we now have a presence in about 150 countries or so. We have over 1,800 employees worldwide, with most of them, believe it or not, in research and development and engineering. We are a technology company focused on security. We've been consistently innovating new technologies in the breadth of our existence. And on the next slide, we'll show you a little bit about that. And one of the things that might be interesting to know is, there are an OEM team here at Bitdefender, which is responsible for about 170 other security vendors using our solution inside. That equates to about 38% of the market. You trust Bitdefender to be inside their technology for their customers. In 2008, we introduced our first machine learning based detections. We've got patents on that, 48 or so granted, and almost 30 still pending. All the way up to IoT in 2015, which was a SOHO in IoT defense system. So you've got anything with an IP address inside your home, your small office, and you need to protect it, it would be able to sit in there. To tunable machine learning in 2017, which is our HyperDetect and part of our ATS solution, which we'll talk about later, all the way up to our integrated prevention, detection, response, and risk analytics that we introduced this year. What's important to understand is the different layers that we have. A lot of different vendors will have a piece of what we do, but none of them have what we do. From hardening control to make sure that you're reducing the size of the endpoint, to pre-execution where you're making sure that even before something happens, you have a good look at what's going on. After execution, post-execution, to make sure that the pre-execution layers didn't miss something. And then we have the ability to take action based on what we find in that file. We also give you investigation and response, right? So it's not enough just to block a file or delete a file, but you want to know why we did that. So we give the ability to look into it and see what caused it, why did Bitdefender block it, why did Bitdefender delete it, so on and so forth.
And then Paul,
yes, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
All of this, right, is in one single agent, right? So this is one of the main reason why Bitdefender is so simple to use, because all of this is a part of the same agent when you deploy it.
Absolutely. So that's one of the key selling points about Bitdefender. Rather than bogging down a system with multiple agents and giving someone multiple consoles to manage different solutions, we can do this all from one agent, one console, and policy driven for multiple. So if you're in a multi-tenant solution, we have customers here, customers there that don't all use the same technology. Everything can be policy driven from the same console. And you'll see that in the bottom, dashboards and reporting, right? So all of that can be done through what we call our gravity zone dashboard. Excuse me. Another thing to consider is what is involved or what's included in when we talk about just our core products, right? So excuse me, in our core products, you have your antivirus, you have your anti-malware, the machine learning and artificial intelligence. We also give you some additional things that you might have to find someplace else from another vendor spending more money, adding an additional agent, right? So our anti-exploit, content control, device control, process inspector, and web filtering. A lot of vendors want you to purchase that separately, install something else, manage it from a different console. We do that, excuse me, we do all that from one console, one agent. In our antivirus and anti-malware, this is the core of what we do, right? So what is it, and what does it do, and why is it important? You know, using signatures and cloud lookup with artificial intelligence, with machine learning, heuristics, and all those things that combine to prevent the majority of things out there. That's part of our antivirus, anti-malware. Excuse me. It's important to understand that, you know, the first level of defense here is your on access. When someone clicks on something, when something becomes active, you want to make sure you're preventing anything bad from happening in the pre-execution stage. Most of what you want to do is before something bad happens, not after. Usually all you want to do is before something bad happens. It's
And
also, go ahead.
Paul, for the, you mentioned the cloud lookup. I think it's interesting to mention also the amount of endpoints worldwide that you guys cover through OEM, and the database of those different types of threats that you guys analyze every day gives a lot of strength to that solution, right?
Right, and I actually should have probably put that in the About Bitdefender section. My apologies. So 500 plus million, close to 600 million endpoints reporting back into our cloud security infrastructure. The thing to understand is machine learning and artificial intelligence is only as good as the sample database that you have to feed it, right? That's how it learns. We have the largest in the industry. And again, that 170 plus OEM vendors, plus our own install bases, plus our home user products, plus all those things help to make sure that we stay ahead of the game as far as what is malicious, what is not, and feeding our machine learning and artificial intelligence. And again, that's all part of the core product. Also included with the core product is our network attack defense. What does it do? It protects against maybe attackers looking to gain access to the system, managing to exploit something in a vulnerability somewhere. You can see over here on the right-hand side, trying to get credentials, trying to do a discovery. A lot of endpoint protection is based on the endpoint. We're also able to detect lateral movement, right? So I made it to your machine, everything looks good. Now I want to start looking around your network to see what other machines that I can get to. Excuse me. It's important to be able to detect and prevent these types of things, because brute force attacks, password stealers, network exploits are taken advantage of this way. This is also included at no extra cost, so you're not paying to protect against network threats as well as endpoint threats. Advanced anti-exploit allows you to get creative on how we interact with applications that can be or are most likely to be exploited. For example, if you're going to be using Adobe Acrobat, excuse me, everybody knows that you get a PDF file that could have some sort of malicious intent that looks like a PDF file, but it's doing something else. You want to make sure you can block it, right? So what does it do? Again, it protects against hijacking legitimate applications. For example, ransomware, it can take advantage of legitimate encryption software, makes it look like it's just doing its own, what it's supposed to be doing. But we're watching those things and we're saying, okay, well, one file, two file, that's not something problem. But now the entire drive, yeah, we need to worry about that. Included in the core product at no extra cost also. Risk analytics is another solution that another feature that we've included. And what does it do? So it identifies and assesses and remediates Windows endpoint weaknesses, right? So you'll notice here we keep a score, and we're taking note of different things in the environment, like weak password, unencrypted drive, open shares, things like that. So from an MSP's perspective, why is that important? It's one thing to protect the endpoint with antivirus and anti-malware. But there are other things on that machine or on that network that you need to look out for that we can now identify, so you can put together a service plan with your customer to make sure you're addressing all those risks that happen to be on the network beyond just anti-malware, antivirus. Excuse me, on the endpoint. This is also included in the core product. There are, if you notice here on the bottom right there, so there are some ability also to automatically remediate it from within the console. Some things cannot be, but that's where you create your service plan with your customer to come up with a service that you can provide to do so. Excuse me. Process monitoring. What does it do? It continuously monitors running processes. Wants to make sure that nothing malicious is happening. So processor looks normal, no problem, but we're keeping a score on it too, right? If all of a sudden that process is doing something silly, maybe it's looking for sensitive information, maybe it's trying to spin up an SMTP server or trying to encrypt things that it shouldn't be. All these things we're keeping a score on, and once it hits just a threshold, we're going to kill it. We're going to let you know that it's happening. Why is it important? It operates in zero trust mode. What that means is even if our signatures and our heuristics and everything else said that this was a really good application, the process inspector is looking at it saying, well, I still don't trust it. I want to make sure that it's legit. And when it's not, it will kill it and let you know about it. It is also included in the core product at no extra cost. You'll notice here that it can also help protect against fileless attacks. So what that means is it doesn't have a payload attached to it, but it's looking to do something, and we can notice the behavior and the tactics of it to say, all right, well, that looks malicious. Maybe it's looking, again, for sensitive data, things of that nature. Content control, what does it do? So we can block or restrict users from getting certain access to websites or URLs by category or by category. We can also prevent unwanted applications from running on the network, and to prevent sensitive data from going out over HTTP or SMTP. Excuse me.
And Paul, I think one interesting thing also with that feature is that, through the different types of policies, for example, for SMB, it's interesting to have a different policy on what, for example, employees can access versus the CEO or the owner or certain person. So you can really say, hey, if I have a tech support team, they cannot go on certain website, Facebook,
Correct.
for example, and even do that in a schedule. So you can say they can only access those websites during their lunch break or so on. So it gives a lot of control to those.
Correct. One of the use cases we had for this was a company didn't want anybody on social networks. So they would tell their own employees to get on a public Wi-Fi to go to social networking to do their marketing, to do their sales marketing and things like that. The better solution would have been to block the category and then using an exclusion, exclude your own social media website. So you can say these are the only ones that you're able to access while all the other social media is blocked. But if you don't care that people are looking at Facebook at lunchtime, you can also let them access it just for that half hour, or whatever is designated as lunchtime. Prevents a lot of wasted time, puts people back into productivity mode, and helps get things moving forward so that you're not at the end of the day saying, where did you spend all your time today? Also included in the core product and no extra cost. Oh, I missed one thing. You see over there, the data protection. So also, if you have sensitive data that you don't want leaving your network by HTTP or SMTP, you can define it, right? So here, SSN happens to be social security number. So a string text that looks like a social security number, we don't want anybody sending it out over HTTP or SMTP. Any of those regulatory compliance-driven companies that you're working with, if you work with a finance, if you're working with medical, they don't want that information leaving the network. So our data protection can help prevent that. Web filtering, it's going to block web-borne attacks, right? So look at anti-phishing, redirecting. If you're clicking on an email that you thought was a legitimate email and brings you to a URL that looks legitimate but's not, and it's trying to phish against you, we can take action on that. Additionally, the protection against fraud, right? So you get an email that looks legit from your CFO that says pay this invoice now. You click on the link to pay the invoice, go to some bad characters and they get money from you. So we also protect against things like that as well. It is also included at no extra cost. And I don't think I'm moving this anymore. There we go. So in the device control, what does it do? It blocks or restricts access to attachable devices. You notice in the bottom right, it's more than just USBs. It's FireWire, PCI, SCSI cards. We can do floppy disk, Bluetooth, webcam, block anything, make them read-only, make them custom, right? So if you want a certain USB that you want your employees to use, you can also whitelist that to say, hey, this is the only one you can use on our network. Included at no extra cost as well. So there's a lot of things that are bundled in that you don't have to worry about paying for, where you might with other solutions have to go find another vendor for. So now we're going to turn it over to Yasser and get a live demo of the core product in action.
All right. So
sounds good.
It's going to be a little transition. So Yasser, now the presenter.
Alrighty. Thank you, Nicholas. Just one sec.
So now we're going to go over a little live demo of the core feature, core product. And as Paul mentioned, Yasser is a security expert. Is really well versed in Bitdefender. So if you have also questions along the webinar, don't hesitate to ask them. And so I'll let you go. Yes.
Sounds good. Alrighty. Well, what you see on the screen is pretty much a representation of that console that we were talking about, that Paul was talking about, and all the features, all the way I see it, all the security framework can be found through our policies, right? In our policies is pretty much where we define the settings and how we find tune the settings for the endpoint protection modules that you have. So what I have here is just the way that I explained it is pretty much between hardening and control, which is part of our core prod solution or protection. And basically here we go anywhere from the surface, which is the combination of the firewall protection, the network protection, which includes even DNS type of protection as well, and network attack defense as well, right? We can also use device control. We can also do, data protection in some capacity, and essentially application blacklisting. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to move to one of my computers here, and hopefully I can showcase what I'm talking about. So in this computer, the policy that I'm using is just called hardening and control. And what we're doing here is enforcing a set of different rules to regulate the way that our users pretty much go to the web and browse. I can show you here pretty quick what is, what are the settings that I pretty much define. And if we go to web access control, as you could see, what I'm using is an approach that we call default deny. This is ideally what all of you should use to pretty much prevent malicious traffic and avoid any issues. And what we're doing is just whitelisting. So as you could see, everything is blocked by default. And then if we walk to the web category filter, which is what we use based on machine learning capabilities, we have like 50 categories here. So in my case, I'm just allowing education and everything else, business as well, and then everything else is blocked by default. And you could see here that I have some exclusions as well. If you want to, exclude any web resources that you use in your company, you can do it as well. Now, if I switch back to that computer, I can show you that I can perfectly navigate to an educational website here. Since I have an exclusion here for VirusTotal, I can even retrieve it. But if I try to go to any website, like let's say Facebook or maybe LinkedIn, unless this is excluded, it's going to be blocked by Bitdefender. So again, we're preventing that threat lands to your environment. The other option that I want to show you here in this area is just the application blacklisting capability, right? So when it comes to application blacklisting, we pretty much, what we do is we avoid or regulate actually the the interaction of applications within your environment. So we can dictate based on rules, and this is actually here in content control, what are the applications that we want to allow or deny. PowerShell is being leveraged for multiple attacks lately, right? And that's exactly one of the categories that I have here as block. So even if that user have access remotely to your computer, as you could see, if I try to launch CMD, if I try to launch PowerShell, this will be blocked on the spot, right? Because we have a rule in place to prevent that from happening. Now, if we go a little bit deep, I can, come here to this computer, which is an attacker. It's nothing but Kali Linux box. As you could see, I open SendMap. SendMap is just to scan the network. It's a front end of Nmap, and this computer is actually, that's the IP address that I have. If I try to do a scan, at some point you would see that the scan will be interrupted. And if I go back to that computer, at some point also in the interface, you should be able to see that we have blocked that. So you can see a port scan has been detected. We tell you who's the malicious user, what is the IP address that they're using, and we can stop it on the spot. That's what we say, we're blocking it. All right. So again, up to here, what we are is just in the basic, let's say, hardening and control layer of protection, right? If we go deep to it, I can show you here. I have a session actually open with one of these two computers, especially a session in a computer that I call pre-execution. All the capabilities that it has is pretty much before the fact, not after the fact. That's why I was able to attack it, because I turned the policy pretty much not to take any action. And as you could see here, I took over already that computer. So I'm actually browsing to the desktop of that particular user. From here, I can do whatever I need to. I can even look at some files that they have on the desktop and see what is the content of those files, even username, passwords, and so on. This is a typical technique that attackers use to compromise and take over any environment. I can even, I don't know, load Mimikatz and try to dump credentials. I can even see what is the username and password there if I go to Kerberos. So it's pretty dangerous, right? We're actually telling you more information than what you should know. So with Bitdefender on, even in the pre-execution computer, you can see how is it that ATC, or Advanced Threat Control, has detected a process that was injected to run a malicious code. And here, of course, I did it on purpose. No action was taken, but typically we block this by default. Actually, we get a lot of calls here saying that people are trying to simulate attacks and they cannot work with it because Bitdefender is catching everything, which is a good thing for us, right? But every tool that is used in the wild or for experimental reasons, we can definitely detect it and stop it on the spot from here. Alrighty, I believe that's pretty much it on this portion of the demo. Nick, if you want to move forward.
All right, so I'll just get back to my screen. Give me a second. Okay, share screen.
Okay, we're doing really good on time too.
All right, so I'll just that. So we'll just switch this. Then Paul, I think you can
Okay.
go.
So all the stuff in the core products that we just talked about, you'll notice on this graph here, there are three sections: antivirus, endpoint protection plus add-ons, and next-gen endpoint protection. Excuse me. 99% of the threats that are out there are going to be prevented by our core product. What we're going to talk about next is our advanced features that are an additional cost, but still a single agent, single console management policy to protect against the elusive threats that are out there, 0 days, hacking, fileless attacks, advanced persistent threats that our EDR detection, excuse me, and our advanced threat security, ATS, will help protect against. This is the stuff that you find in the news now, the really bad stuff where, someone was hacked for 5 years before they realized it because whatever they happen to be using was only using traditional protection, and they weren't doing a deeper inspection. They were not looking at behaviors or tactics. And by the time they found out that they were breached, it was way too late. For this, I am going to hand it back over to Yasser. Yasser has a really good knowledge of what's going on here, how to protect against it. And he's involved in a lot of industry events where he's speaking to crowds about this type of attack and protecting against it. So, Yasser, the floor is yours.
Sounds good. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, if Nick can give me access back to the presenter, I can definitely share my screen and show some facts here.
Okay.
Mhm. Alrighty, thank you for that. We just go to this screen. Please, Paul and Nick, confirm if you can see my screen.
I can.
Alrighty, sounds good. Okay, so these pretty much advanced components that Paul was mentioning, even though we offer it as an add-on or add-on features as part of our offering on the MSP, for me, there are two there that are essential, and we're talking about advanced threat control, advanced threat security, and also the EDR. I get confused sometimes with ATS and ATC because one is a module, the other one is part of the offering. But so these two components, why is it that I say that they are essential when it comes to especially preventing or taking action on elusive type of threats? Well, the first one, it's basically the use case here is basically when we talk about security solutions and we say that they are disruptive, that sometimes they have a lot of false positive, they detect things that they shouldn't be detecting. And as you know, a security vendor, we want to be very accurate when it comes to detection, and we want to provide you with that balance between efficacy and performance, right? So this component, it can be a trainer for our machine learning capabilities on your system. So as you can see on the screen, we have 5 classifiers, and then based on those 5 classifiers or protection levels, you can go ahead and fine and tune the settings for machine learning. But pretty much tell the module how is it that you want to use it, right? So I can be aggressive with targeted attacks. I can do the same with exploits and the same with ransomware. Maybe you have a group of developers that they use a lot of grayware. You want to be permissive with that. That doesn't mean that they're going to be unprotected, but you can play with it. If you leave it just as it is, report only mode for a couple of weeks, we can learn from your environment what is it that is being detected. And not only that, we can tell you the reasons why these higher level detections were made. And then based on that, you can create exclusions, you can fine and tune your settings. And then once you know everything that is moving on your environment, you can go ahead and adopt your security posture. This component is essential for social purpose, for maintaining that balance between detection and performance. And at the same time, it acts on the most elusive type of threats at pre-execution. We're talking about any script-based type of attack, even fileless type of attack. This component is the one that takes care of them, right? And as a demonstration here, let me just go back to any of my computers since it's a pre-execution component. I was running, actually, I don't want to get you bored with trying to simulate or anything, but I was running a sample here before we actually share my screen, and you can see how is it that HyperDetect detected it. Again, in my environment, I want to have everything represented and I want to do everything manually. That's what it says. There was no action taken, but by default, it can detect everything that moves on the environment. I have a couple of samples here that I can definitely extract, and you can see how it works. So let me just try to extract this. Let me put the password, and you would see the different options that we have. Hold on just one sec. I believe I put the password wrong. It happens with so many systems and so many environments to manage. But yeah, I'm going to extract it here. And you can see how Hyperdetect is going to go crazy with it. So we're not even executing that file. All we're doing is just modifying the file system by extracting them and trying to write them into this folder. And as you could see, Hyperdetect pretty much cached them all on the spot. So we versus so many other vendors in the industry, we don't let something sit on your system, an object sit on your system, and wait for it to do something bad to actually take action. So we're proactive enough to identify that and detect it on the spot before the fact. All right. Now, the other component that I want to mention here, it's one of my favorites, and when I say one of my favorites is because I like to do deep analysis on objects and not just take action just because. And this is the Sandbox analyzer, right? Now, what is the use case with the Sandbox analyzer? What is the value of it? Because just based on the description and the name, what is a sandbox? It's just a testing environment. It's just an isolated environment to do tests. But what our sandbox analyzer does is it represents what we call a zero trust security framework. Zero trust because you can run it in blocking mode. And even though Bitdefender doesn't know about a specific type of threat, we can block it. In the meantime, submit it to the cloud because this is a cloud-based technology, analyze it, and then return the verdict, right? So even if this is a 0-day type of threat, we can still take action on it, regardless if we have signatures or we don't, right? And the use case that I see here that is highly beneficial for everybody is if you right now have a malware outbreak with your current security vendor, the course of action would be pretty much to collect the sample, archive it, send it to them in a support ticket, then wait for them to escalate it to the malware analysis team. And if you're lucky enough, that process might take, I don't know, 2 to 6 hours for you to get the verdict back, for you to get the signature or the detection back. In our case, we're reducing that to 5 minutes or less. So within 5 minutes or less, you can come here to the sandbox and you can see everything that has been submitted. In fact, this file that was unknown on that particular computer that I was showing you is actually represented here. So since we didn't know about this file, even though it was impersonated by the name of beauty.exe, we still block it and submit it to the sandbox for analysis. So again, it's an essential component that you should have. Don't look at it as a feature. Don't look at it as bells and whistles. Look at it as an essential security component or control to make sure your environment is protected, even when you cannot prevent at pre-execution. All right. And then the other component that I wanted to mention here that is really, really important is the EDR. I don't know if you guys are familiar with EDR. EDR started as a cool to have type of feature in 2016. The reason for that is because we had so many data breaches, especially with ransomwares like CTV, ransomwares, that were making a lot of noise in the media. Customers started asking for this capability, the capability to extend the visibility and see more than just malware was detected, we remove it from your system, just basic notifications, right? Now, from my side, what I see here is, or the way that I see this from my side is, it's an essential component, especially for data breaches. So when you have a data breach, right, in the security realm, the first question that the local authorities are going to ask you as an MSP, as the one that managed the security function for your customers, is how did you know How did you find out about this? If you cannot elaborate on that, if you cannot provide information enough to pretty much cover your backs, they're gonna find you negligent for it. And that's why we've decided in 2017 to launch EDR. Um, we pretty much have gone through a lot of different releases, enhancing the product and so on. And this is what I like about it is that we call it, or I call it, EDR for human beings. If you go to a security operations center, for you to understand the solutions that they use there, you have to be really highly skilled, right? In our EDR, even a kid can jump into my console and can see exactly what is it that happened on any incident, right? So I can see that this computer opened a process, and then after that, um, a file was run that looks like suspicious. This is not anything malicious, especially PowerShell. There's nothing wrong with PowerShell. However, the way in which it was executed is what we see as fishy, and you can see the example over here. All right, so we're providing this to you so you can have full visibility, and then you can take action from there. From here, you can go ahead and just kill that process. You can go ahead and actually isolate this computer from the network. I'm not going to do it because otherwise I'm not going to be able to jump into the webinar, but you can isolate that computer from the local network and also from the internet in the meantime that you investigate about this issue, right? Now, in our EDR, we have two sides of the island. We have a portion that says investigate, that is pretty much intended for you to see suspicious activity. And then there is a portion of it that is called review, that is pretty much based on everything that can be prevented in our end, even if you haven't taken any action, right? So I'm gonna bring some examples here. One of them is one that I run before the session, and it's actually here. I can just log it into my computer and show you that one. What I want to highlight here is nothing but the fact that Bitdefender also provides EDR for Mac, right? So if I come here and execute that file, which is a malicious script, it's going to start just creating a couple of Python scripts, and it's going to create actually malicious code or files. As you could see, that was removed from the screen, and you can see that Bitdefender has deleted that virus that was called Trojan Mac.poc. Now, this is really hard to accomplish because typically people say that there's no viruses for Mac, there's no threats for Mac. Well, here is just an example, and this is just something that we created within a couple of minutes, right? In the console, if I come here and look for that particular console, for that particular endpoint, I can see the incident represented here. So you can see that this computer, let me just expand that. You can see that this computer is called Mac local, was, a process was executed, then the terminal was opened, then a bunch of different files were actually written to the file system, and you can even see that a malicious shell was executed, or malicious process, then that call out to Python to create the payload, and you can see a sequence of everything that happened here, right? So there's no way to escape from our agent, even if you're using a Mac computer, right? Now, I'm going to show you another thing that we accomplish here, especially with the combination of the um, Sandbox and the Hyperdetect, along with the EDR. Let me just go back to my console real quick, and trying to click here is kind of not allowing me to, but I can switch to the other console. That's not a big problem. Just give me 1 second here. As you could see, as soon as I try to log in, one of the things that we do is we take care of the basic things first, and this is nothing but 2FA. All our consoles can afford 2FA, so that way you're not exposed, or your credentials are not exposed to a brute force type of attack, right? So once you log in, I can come here to my instance again, and I can look for that particular one. So let me just put here Word, see if that one comes up. All right. Let me just open here. Just give me 1 second just to find the specific one that I'm looking for. And then what I'm gonna do here is just change a little bit the filters. I'm gonna put it just for every single status. And let's wait for it to load. Alrighty. Alrighty. So here is one of the examples that I was looking for. As you could see, there's a lot of malicious files that were extracted, that were created as a result of this incident. So what I wanted to show you is that every single time that we have a threat, that we have a malicious object detected, Bitdefender, along with the Sandbox analyzer, creates a forensic report for you. Now, the benefit of that is Bitdefender as a security vendor can be wrong, right? We maybe detected that as a mistake. We thought that it was malware, but it's not malware. It's a false positive. How did you really know? Well, one of the ways that we can actually know is by going to the Sandbox report. And here we will tell you everything about that object, right? So we can tell you everything from the beginning, meaning, which family it belongs to, what is it that it does, all the way up to MITRE techniques that it uses, different stages. MITRE, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's nothing but a true representation of the cyber attack kill chain in different stages. And so we are pretty much depicting here what is it that it does throughout the stages. And then if you want graphical information, we can show you what is it that it looks like, processes related to it, and even indicators of compromise if there's any. So we're providing you with the source of truth, so you can actually go back to your environment and take action on that particular file. I'm going to look for another one here that might be relevant. Let me just look for one that is like really just 1 second. All right, let me see this one, and if not, I can definitely jump into another console that I have and show you that particular one. Just give me 1 sec. I just want to show a real life ransomware that is actually really good at impersonating, and I want you guys to definitely take a look at that and take a look at how Bitdefender how is it that we detect it. So just 1 second, I'm just dealing with my 2FA real quick.
While Yasser's doing that, can we get a check on the time that we have left, please?
We have 16 minutes left.
Perfect. Thank you.
I believe we have plenty of time to show these, and then we can jump into a Q&A session if you guys are okay with it. So yeah, I have it here, and I can definitely show it. All right, that's the beauty of having 2,000 consoles. So here is the particular case that I wanted to show you. This file, it says sample.l.exe. It looks like a sample, but what is that it is? So we are saying here that the anti-malware engine is saying that it's ransomware, but we don't know about that. So as I show you with the Sandbox, we can have a true representation of what it does in the wild. And here you can see all the attributes, all the information about that particular threat. In fact, if I go to the MITRE techniques, you can see what happened from the beginning, which means execution all the way up to lateral movement, discovery, and persistence. And then from there, if you're graphical just like me, that I like to see things, so you can have a visual representation of what it does, right? All the files that it creates, everything that was written to the file system, how many outbound calls to command and control centers were made, and then even the process to remove or delete shadow copies, right? And if you want to see it, a screen of the ransomware, here it is. So even though it was named differently, it is nothing but GangCrab 5.2. Alrighty, so I think that concludes the demo. If you guys have any question, it's perfect timing for it.
All right. All right. So we'll just get back to the presentation.
Yep.
Sorry for the transition. So thank you, Yasser, for this example of the advanced threat security and also the endpoint detection and response. So those are part of the features. So we'll do a little recap of the said feature.
Yep.
Sorry. And also because there's other modules that are accessible besides those two, but those are more enhancement, I would say, to the basic solution, right? But I'll let Paul talk a little bit more about the other add-ons, and then we'll go on with the questions at the end.
Okay, perfect. So what Yasser was just demonstrating is the advanced threat security, which includes HyperDetect and Sandbox, and the endpoint detection and response, which is our EDR modules. Together, they give you triageable incidents on security events in your environment, so that you can help understand what happened, how far it got, and come up with a plan of action with your customers. In addition to those, we also have full disk encryption, right? So we're not using a third party though. On Microsoft, on Office, on Windows, we're taking advantage of BitLocker. It's already integrated with the environments. Now you can manage the keys from our console. On Mac, same thing with FileVault. Patch management, in addition to Microsoft, it's also third-party patch management, a long list of third-party applications that we can help with patching. Why is that important? So let me just get to security for virtualized environments for a second, and that's one of the other ones. And I'll get into the why that's important in a minute. Yasser just walked you through that advanced threat security, HyperDetect, and why it was important. It is licensed you with core product plus ATS, HyperDetect, and Sandbox Analyzer per device. Sandbox Analyzer was another part of the ATS. It's core product plus ATS, HyperDetect, and Sandbox Analyzer per device. Endpoint detection and response is the other piece that he showed you, and it's core product plus EDR. ATS is a prerequisite, so you'll need ATS as well, and it's licensed per device. And where we go. All right, security for virtualized environments allows you to offload scanning of virtual machines to a secure virtual appliance in the environment. And why is that important? It's ultra lightweight scanning. So we're deduping the scanning process. We're releasing resources that you would have to use to set aside for when antivirus started scanning and doing its job, so that you wouldn't paralyze the system. What we're doing now is allowing you to say, put the secure virtualized appliance in the environment, offload the scanning to it, let my virtual machines, be it desktop or servers, be as productive as possible without being impacted by scanning. It's licensed on virtual servers. There's a total number of virtual servers, and your virtual desktops are licensed on an hourly rate, because they're not always on. Sometimes they go down. When they come back on, for however long it's on, you get billed, and both are billed monthly. Not moving forward. Okay, there we go. Patch management. Some of the reasons why you need to look at patch management: vulnerabilities, exploits. People are, Patch Tuesday comes out, for example, and Wednesday malicious code writers are writing exploits for those that they know not everybody's going to be able to patch. So they go out and they try to take advantage of what people are not going to do yet. Will help with Microsoft and third-party patching. You need core plus patch management per device and the full disk encryption. Excuse me. So again, BitLocker on Windows, FileVault on Mac. We're not deploying third-party. We're just managing it from our console. You'd be able to encrypt, decrypt from our console, as well as provide a new password. If someone's trying to log in, or if they have a pre-boot password, which a lot of people don't anymore. But if you're trying to decrypt a hard drive, if you're trying to encrypt a hard drive, and you don't remember the password, you can get to the recovery key, read it to they can read that back to you here at our console, and you can reveal a new password for it.
And Paul,
Yep.
Business-wise, for companies with a lot of employees on the road working with laptop nowadays, this is really interesting because you can manage all of that from the Gravity Zone portal, but it's a great asset to have to protect those users or company data.
Correct. Lost or stolen devices without the ability to access the hard drive, they're not going to be able to get the data on it.
I want to mention something there, Paul, if I have some time.
Yep.
Yeah, what I want to say here is that besides the basic purpose of use case of it, which is what you've mentioned, there's a lot of requirements when it comes to compliance, regulatory frameworks that pretty much force you to use encryption. For instance, PCI DSS. All of you in the webinar, you're MSPs, and as a MSP, you're a merchant. So that means that you would have to comply with PCI DSS according to the number of transactions that you do in a year. And according to PCI DSS version 3.2, which is still current, you guys have to use either encryption or tokenization in any system that processes sensitive information. So this is a really good point that check those boxes for compliance.
Correct.
That's a good point. All right. So moving on. So we SureWeb is going to offer a promotion, pretty interesting promotion, starting as today. After the webinar, a link is going to be sent to everyone that attended. So it is for partners only, though. You can sign up on the promotion landing page, and you need to activate at least one customer before the end of February. So after the registration phase, there's going to be a 6-month period for you to build your Bitdefender business. And on that 6 month, SureWeb is going to extend 3 times that last month credit of services on your account. So it is a great way to get started, add customer, get to know the solution, and then you're going to have a payout on the maximum amount after those 6 months. So it's a great way for you to benefit and also take part of the SureWeb family if you're not already a partner. I mean, if you're existing, I think this can bring tremendous value to your existing customers. And that's it for the promotion. We're going to go ahead and talk a little bit. We're going to go with a QA session. I had a couple of questions in the chat. The first one was regarding the pricing. For the pricing, it is going to be different depending on your partner pricing tier. So I will encourage you to reach out to your partner rep, or if you're direct, you can reach out to our corporate team. This is going to be, case by case depending on where you fall. And I believe, so for the promotion, there's a question also on that. So yes, it's going to be really on the 6th month after, starting in March. So from March to August, on that last month, we're going to pay out 3 times that credit. So, and there is no commitment based on that. So you bring whatever business you can, and then we're going to try to help you profit from that. All right. All right. I'll try to see this. Then I think in terms of times, we still have about 5 minutes. So if there's any more question, Paul and Yasser are here. And also there's going to be a survey after this this webinar. There's a couple questions if you are interested in answering. This is really nice. And also the slides from the deck to answer one of our partners. The slides from the deck are going to be sent to you as well in an email after the webinar. All right, so I think I have a question for you, Yasser or Paul. We had a question about DNS. So someone is asking, they're using OpenDNS, I believe, and they were wondering if something in the solution would be an equivalent or covering those needs. Yasser, if you're talking, you're muted.
Alrighty. Sorry, I was checking on something here on my environment. So you're asking if the DNS protection is equivalent to what?
OpenDNS.
OpenDNS. Well, it's actually better because when it comes to OpenDNS, it's pretty much some of the requests or most of the requests are allowed to hit your DNS, and it's kind of like mainly a network-based type of protection at a different layer. We do it at the endpoint level. So that means that right before you send a request to your DNS and goes through your backbones, we can definitely intercept it at the endpoint. And if we believe that this is something that is a category that should be prohibited or something, we stop it on the spot. So there's two sides of it. One that goes with the rules, which is pretty much what you saw in the demonstration with the web category filter that we have. And then the other piece of it is just the protection for anti-phishing, anti-spam, and any malicious websites. So we can definitely achieve that again at the endpoint level.
Okay, thanks for the answer. So I'm going to take one last question. Someone is asking, is it possible to do mix and match with the different features that we saw? Definitely. Basically, based on the policies that you apply on different endpoint, those are going to use certain types of services or add-ons. So based on that, that usage is going to count for your bill at the end of the month. So essentially, I think we're pretty much on time. We answered the question, we did the whole thing. Paul, thank you for joining us today. Yasser, thank you for joining us today.
Always a pleasure.
Sure.